Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump discussion. If you can hear some groovy music, it's because I'm actually off-site today in a hotel waiting for a client, and this is the quietest place I can find. Last year, we did 4 webinars on DE&i, which, if we're honest, had the lowest attendance of all the webinars that we've done over the last sort of nearly 2 years. And so this week, we're going to revisit the topic to see what's changed in the last 12 months. So positive discrimination or positively futile. So how do recruiters approach DE&i? And when we start to look at the marketplace, 47% of the UK workforce is women. For every pound earned by a man, a woman earns 81 pence. Only 9.7% of executives in the FTSE 100 companies are held by women. All BAME groups are more likely to be overqualified than a white ethnic group, but white employees are more likely to be promoted than any other group. Employment rate in the ethnic minorities in the UK is only 62% compared to employment rate of the white workers at 75%. Almost a third to 32% of all BAME employees have witnessed racism from colleagues in the last 5 years. 46.3% of the working age disabled people are employed compared to 76% of the age working of non-disabled people. This is an interesting one. 1 in 8 trans employees have been physically attacked by colleagues or customers, and almost a third of non-binary people, 31%, and 1 in 5 of trans people don't feel that they're able to wear work attire representing their gender or expressing their gender in work. Employers who work for a female manager are 6 times more engaged on average than those that work for a male manager. On average, having a woman in a leadership position aligned with a 15% increase in profitability. And if we actually looked at addressing diversity in the UK, according to the stats, it would put £24 billion a year into the UK economy. So some really interesting facts. So what's changed in the last 12 months? So let me sort of give you some sort of interesting stats from our point of view. So here we go. So last year, as I said at the beginning, we had the lowest attendance, which was 12. Today, we have 7. When we were challenged by Jackie about what the problem was, she said it's a white middle-aged man's problem. Today, ladies and gents, the only people that are on this call that are male are Dave and myself. Everybody else who's attending is a female. So yes, it is genuinely a white middle-aged man's problem. And so what's changed from 12 months from my point of view at the moment? Nothing has changed a great deal. So let's sort of jump into this and have a proper conversation about what we think has changed and what we should be doing about it. So Paul is actually delivering some training today. So Heather and Dave is with me. So let's sort of really get their understanding. So let's sort of hit the nail on the head. As I said, we ran 4 webinars last year, and that had the lowest attendance. Today, again, is another low attendance, and again, it is predominantly female. Last year, well, our lowest attendance was 12, and one of those people was a male from there. So why? Why do you think, and let's be honest, let's not pull any punches, why do you think it is what it is at the moment?
Honestly, Howard, I first of all, to those who
Heather, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you not? Can't hear me at all.
I can hear you, Heather.
Do you want to jump in, Dave?
I can hear Heather.
Let me. I wonder if anybody could just pop in the chat box whether they can hear me, because I can hear me and my mic seems to be working. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Marie. I just wanted to say welcome to those who have joined.
It's only me that can't hear.
Sorry, Howard. Thank you very much for joining us, those who have. And I can't tell you how disappointed I am again that as soon as we put anything to do with diversity, equity and inclusion in the title of a webinar, what happens is that we have an absolute drop in numbers. It's just so disappointing, I think. And one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about later is how do we get the white men in the room, because we're, you know, to a degree preaching to the converted, and I can't tell you how disappointing it is. It's one, I'm not disappointed with the people we've got listening. I think that's wonderful, and you're very welcome, all of you, and I'd love it if in the chats you can continue to contribute to the conversation. Why do I think it is? I think that if you have not ever personally been affected by inclusion or the lack of inclusion, I think it's very difficult for people to see any value and importance in talking about it. And that's really sad. So when I talk to business leaders who are male, either they have somebody who is a friend who has been impacted by lack of inclusion, they have a family member perhaps who's neurodiverse, they then have an interest in inclusion and talking about inclusion. But if they haven't been personally impacted by it, I just think they find it hard to understand. And what I find even more disappointing, and apologies for my passion about this, is right now we're at a point when we can't find bloody candidates to fill all the jobs we've got. Why can we not get other people to understand that this isn't just about, this isn't fluffy, this is a business imperative that we widen the net that we're fishing in for candidates? I so disappointed.
And actually, Heather, I think if I'm allowed to be annoyed, I'm annoyed. It's frustrating, it's disappointing. However, it isn't unexpected, and I think that's the sadness that I feel, because I guess I'm one of the white males that is passionate about this topic, for all the good it brings for everyone, not just for those people that we're talking about in this topic. And I think an honest answer, I just don't think enough people care enough that it's on their agenda, so they want to find out more about it, or they want to contribute. Because if they did care enough, they'd attend.
Yeah.
You know, if 30 people can attend one of our webinars on commission payments, or on winning new business, or on opening your business in a new geography, which are all challenges that we face every day, surely access to talent pools, getting a more diverse workforce, surely all of the things, and then look at the stats that Howard read out to us, surely all those things are important to us also. And we live in a world, I mean, I've got 6 kids, and I've got some of them are teenagers, a couple of them are a little bit older. This is just part of their life.
Yeah.
And they are our workforce, both of today and in the next few years. And for them, they live with this. This is just, they would, in some respects, I think some of my kids would find it bizarre that I'm on a webinar talking about it, because it's like, well, why is that a special topic? You know, that's how we live our lives. So it's a challenge, but I'm not giving up on it. We'll carry on doing it, Heather. And
yeah. We're not going to stop talking about it.
You know, it's the right thing to do for everyone, not just for our sector.
Yeah.
Are you back with us, Howard? Can you hear us?
Oh, we can't hear you now, Howard.
Maybe he's gone. Should we
why don't we pick up, because we can't hear Howard.
Carry on.
Cool. Okay. So disappointment, I think it is about passion, but the next area that I think Howard suggested we talk about was, you know, is diversity, equity and inclusion just a tick box exercise for most SME recruiters? And I think we are talking about SME recruiters rather than some of the bigger recruitment businesses that perhaps have enough resource to have somebody exclusively responsible for this sort of thing.
And I think for many, Heather, it is a bit of a tick box exercise, because most of our community within Jump are those agencies that are scaling up. So they will have roughly between 4 and 75 consultants. I know we've got a few that are 1s and 2s, and we've got some that are into triple figures, but for the most part, but that I think is also an accurate reflection of most of the UK recruitment market.
Yes.
You know, the Springs, the Adecos, the Reeds, the Randstads, the AMSs of this world, all of those great companies, huge numbers of people. Most of them have more people in teams that look at diversity, equity, inclusion than most of us employ.
Yeah.
In our industry, in our businesses. So then you get an RFI or a tender, and it asks you for a diversity policy. And I had this not that long ago, where somebody phoned me or left me a voicemail message to say, "Do you have a diversity policy I can borrow?" and I'm glad that I didn't take the call, because I just would have got even more angry. Because it's one of those, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to copy and paste something that you don't believe in? You've just got to copy and paste. What's your heart saying? Where's your heart at?
Yeah.
And you know what? Most companies that ask for that are intelligent enough to know when you have just copied and pasted something, and it isn't something that you live and breathe.
Yeah.
So it does become a tick box exercise for some. I'm not giving them an out in terms of an excuse, but there's an awful lot going on in our world of recruitment at the moment. There's a lot of economic stuff. There's a lot of social stuff. There's cost of living. There's fuel. There's all of those sort of things. So we are juggling and plate spinning so many different challenges. If this is one of those plates, it's the one that I urge people to keep spinning and not to drop, and keep promoting and keep being passionate about.
Yeah.
Just to interrupt there, can you guys hear me now? Brilliant.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. So yeah, sorry about that. So
that's okay. So if I can answer, if I'll just give my point of view on that, and then Howard, you can pick back up as we move on to the next area. I agree, Dave. For many small and medium-sized recruitment businesses, it is a tick box exercise, but for a significant number, it isn't. And I think it is something that really helps them differentiate themselves. You can tell those businesses who take this seriously, and I genuinely believe it will continue. It does, and it will continue to give them a competitive edge. And you talked about your family and the young people in your life, and how much this is part of their just normal life. We have to understand that the people coming into our business expect us to talk about inclusion. They expect us to be inclusive. They expect us to be able to have the right language, to shout about it, to talk about it, to campaign about it. And if we don't, we are just so missing a trick. And I know some of the businesses of those people who have dialed in to join today, and I know that they take it seriously, and it's not a tick box exercise for them. So I think it's a great differentiator, but sadly for many, it is genuinely, have you got a diversity policy? Have you got something you can just do for us, rather than actually thinking about what they need to do in their organization? That's missing a trick.
So I think it goes bigger than that when you start to think about what's happening, and you start to think about how it's happening, and you start to think about the young people of today and the culture of today, which is very much a blame culture, very much a sue culture, etc. So if you haven't got that if you're just using it as a tick box exercise, I mean, my son's dyspraxic, and he's worked for a couple of companies who just don't care about his problems, how he can learn, etc., etc. It's all down to him, and yet there'll be a possibility in years to come where he can turn around and start to sue those companies for that type of behavior, because obviously it's detrimental to his learning and detrimental to his ability to actually earn money, because they're not addressing that type of situation. So I think those that treat it as a tick box exercise, it will come back at some point and bite them. And we've got to start to think about, the big companies are really taking it on. Some generally are taking it on in a very, very positive way. Some are still doing it as a tick box exercise. But what we tend to find, if the big companies start to take it on, it rolls downhill. And after a while, everyone starts to adopt certain parts of those practices. So it's coming. We know it's coming. So to me, why aren't we addressing it earlier than we are at the moment? And why are we leaving it in such a situation where we are openly leaving ourselves vulnerable for our lack of knowledge, or our typical, let's go back to the white middle-aged man, just burying our head in the sand saying it's not my problem, when actually it is our problem, it's all of our problem, and we've got to sort of look at that. So if we look at in agencies that we coach and agencies that we've sort of discussed this with, have you seen, because Dave, you were talking about you had a request for a policy there, have you seen an increase in DE&i in recruitment filtering from their clients, etc.? And if so, what have you actually seen?
I've seen a live example, certainly this year, was an RFI for a financial institution that one of the agencies that I work with. And what they didn't know, the agency didn't know, was what the scoring criteria was. And they spent an awful lot of time, rightly, on getting the pricing right. There was also a bit about prior service, so how had you delivered and how you source your candidates, obviously very important. There was a bit, my words, on DE&I, and there was an environmental policy. So they rightly filled out the environmental policy. They had a good answer, good response to the DE&I, and then they submitted it, and then they had to do a presentation. At the presentation, they were told that each of those 4 things carried equal weight on the scoring. And it was a very modern, quite intelligent approach by this financial services company, which rather threw the agency a little bit on the back foot, because they're not a huge agency. They had supplied, so they got good scoring on the supply, good scoring on the pricing, not so good scoring on diversity, and weren't able to answer some of the questions. And on the environmental policy, they got a very low score because they recycle cartridges and do all of those sort of things that we all do, but there wasn't a lot to it. So I was quite pleased, not for them, but I was quite pleased that actually that particular institution had put DE&I really firmly at the front and put their money where their mouth is, and was saying, actually, we really want you to judge this. How do you attract your candidates? How do you measure what you attract? Another big accountancy firm recently went out to tender and demanded of their suppliers whether they were going to supply 1 or 2 candidates during the year or 400, where they sourced their candidates, how they measured, how did they know that they were going to include others from the diverse communities that we're talking about. So it's absolutely out there in the companies that we are placing people. Yes, there are always going to be some that will just say, just give me a person, I'm desperate. But when you're bidding, I think it's live, and as you said, Howard, will become even more important as the months and years go by.
Yeah, and I would concur with that, Dave. I've definitely had clients of ours contact me because they're getting more questions to answer on different aspects of diversity. So it is rarely now just give us a copy of your diversity policy, yeah. That which is what it was in the past. It is what action are you going to take, or have you taken, to ensure that you have a wider candidate pool for us? Do you measure it? How do you measure it? What have you done actively? And so there are really wide-ranging questions wanting evidence of actual stuff that you can't respond to effectively with a tick box approach in your organization. And the other thing I've seen more of, Howard, is when I've been doing management training with managers and directors in recruitment businesses, is increasingly clients asking the recruiters when they're doing sales calls out, to talk to clients and to win new business, wanting to talk about diversity. So we're needing to skill up recruiters to be able to respond to those questions. So, how do they deal with the increasing requests to have more women on the shortlist? So what are they going to do with that? Because I deal with a few IT recruiters, and they are getting that more and more often, that they want more women on the shortlist. So how does a recruiter deal with that question?
It's not just more women, though, is it? It's more.
But that's the one I've seen. That's the one I've heard of live, is people being more and more often in IT, particularly because in IT recruitment, that's the big issue for them. They've got a range of diversities from BAME and all that kind of stuff, but what they haven't got is enough women
So it's interesting, isn't it? So I concur with what you're asking, because I'm seeing that with some of my clients as well. But one client, I saw it to the nth degree, where they asked for their diversity policy. They asked them to do what you were talking about, Dave, going through the policies and writing through the policies. But then they asked them to actually go through their business and give the percentage of their business. And it was really interesting. And this was a small agency, all female, and automatically they failed because it was not just all female, all white female. And so it's going to become more and more a prohibitor to business for certain agencies, and that was to supply into a government body. Wow. And that was a very large percentage of their turnover was coming from that body. Yeah. So it's going to start to affect people in lots of different ways. And it's not just looking at how we recruit externally for our clients, it's also what we are doing internally. So I think they're going to start to say, well, if you're following all these policies, let's put that policy to the test. What's your business look like? And it was a very different conversation when they suddenly turned it back onto your business. We have all these policies, we're doing all these things from a recruitment point of view, but yet you're not living up to those policies. And that goes back to your values and what have you, and your behaviors. But it was pointed that, that is going to come. Now, we usually say that on a tender process that the government are usually quite upfront and quite very quick to change the way they tender, because they want to be seen to be leading, where on other things they're very slow to do certain things. But certainly what you tend to find is when the government start to do it, then the big players start to do it, and then again that starts to move downhill again. And so it is genuinely coming, and it will generally start to push into your business at some stage. So if we looked at that and said, if we think the big boys are doing it, we know eventually it will trickle downhill to the SME market. When do you think in earnest it will genuinely start to change the face of recruitment and how we should be not only just recruiting from our client's point of view, but internally for our business point of view?
Well, I think it is, despite the low attendance this morning. I believe it is right now, Howard. And Marie makes a point about our clients are on a journey. We are all on this journey, kind of learning together. Some of us, I'm not saying we are, but some of us may be more advanced in our thinking, shall we say, than others. But it is a journey. But it's a journey which leads to good things. As you said, Howard, what was it, 24 billion or something could be added to the economy? So yeah. It's a no-brainer. I mean, it is one of the few things in recruitment that we can say is a no-brainer. Let's work hard to get it right, because if we get it right, it's for the betterment of everybody. But it is a journey. But I think it's a journey we've started. And I think it's a journey where some are leading on well, and some have a very strong voice, a strident voice and a positive voice. And others are playing a little bit of catch up. It's just trying to open the minds of those who think it's a fad or a phase. That's where I think that becomes an individual, almost one-to-one conversation with that person to kind of challenge their thinking about why they think that. And because they're not going to sign up to things like this, they're not going to read some of the books, they're not going to read the stats, they're not going to look at it. They just think we'll get over it. And that's the challenge.
Yeah, I want to have that optimism, Dave. I really want to be optimistic and say, because as Marie, as you say, we're all on a journey and we can't get left behind. And I think there's two things that are going to drive this. One is our clients are going to drive this. So the more our clients feel that DE&I is important, the more the recruitment industry has to change. And the other thing that might change it is a wave of new people coming into our industry for whom this is second nature. It's not even a debate and a discussion. Maybe that will change things. But I feel very despondent that there's not enough change in our industry. But that there of itself creates great opportunity for those who do get it. Right, yeah. Because for those who do get it, this is a massive opportunity to differentiate yourself from your competition. massive opportunity.
And
And, you know, all credit to those people who put in the hard yards to make this stuff work and to take people in there, or you know, because there'll be some people on this call who feel very passionately about this stuff, but are trying to drag an SMT kicking and screaming into the 21st century. You know, all power to your elbow, keep going, this is worth it, this is a differentiator, you know, go for it, you can make a difference. And there is a really clear business imperative to focus on. And I think Howard's right in that there's some legal stuff around it, and for some organizations they'll only ever change if the law says they're going, you know, they change. And so the fact that we're likely to get some, alongside the gender pay gap data, we're also likely to get some stuff around ethnicity pay gap that's going to come, and maybe that will drive some behavioral changes, and at very least in terms of having data, which might start a debate and a discussion. But I think, you know, let's just really get going with this stuff, and, you know, keep going. Don't worry about the fact that the rest of the industry is not keeping up with you. Go for it.
There's the question, is that the rest of the industry isn't keeping up. And so if you start to think about first mover advantage and being the first people into this, then all of a sudden you have a very, very different situation. And if you go back and say, I remember, I think I've told this story a couple of times, sort of going up to Scotland about 4 or 5 years ago and talking about the digital wave is coming and video recruitment is going to be the real big thing. And I almost got laughed out of the room and thrown out of the room. And it was quite sort of like, I'm thinking, right, thanks very much, guys. You know, then coronavirus hit, and all of a sudden the clamour for video was just unbelievable. So hopefully there's not sort of a world event like coronavirus, but I hope there is an event that actually puts this right at the forefront of everything. So if you've already got that first mover advantage, then you're going to be beyond the game and moving very, very quickly. So I think we've got to start to think from an entrepreneurial point of view. This isn't just about the tick box exercise. This is about, this could give us a genuine opportunity to move our business forward. So is it coming? Yes. Is it a trickle at the moment? Yes. But it doesn't take long for that trickle to suddenly start to create a bit of a tsunami. And that's when we start to think, if we play catch up then, we're miles behind. But if we start now and really start to build now, then we're going to be in a very, very different situation to where we were. And that's when you start to take first mover advantage. So I think there's a genuine view.
Oh, but it makes me weep, Howard. When I've been banging on about diversity in recruitment for 30 years, the idea that we're still talking about first mover advantage.
The thing is, we can make a difference. Just the 11 of us on this call now, we can still make a difference by making a decision that says we'll devote a bit of time to go and talk into the schools. For example, we're not going to see any return in the next 3 or 4 years, 5 years, 8 years in our business, but we are going to go and talk in schools about candidates and what we do and how it matters. I attended and spoke at a data center event 3 weeks ago in London. There were 116 people, 3 women. One of them was carrying the tray of water and Biscoff biscuits. So, and there were some recruitment companies there. So the challenge was, well, we need to go into the schools. And they were all mainly white men in their 50s and 60s. And so that's one aspect of diversity, I get that. But the challenge is, well, let's go into schools and start talking. Let's go and make sure that we're doing something about it, as well as what we're doing now, talking and making it aware, and just have it as part of our everyday life in how we engage with our suppliers, how we engage with the companies. It's not an easy thing to do, and it is sadly it is a long-term thing. But
and you're right there. We can't give up. We can't be frustrated. We have to make sure that in our sphere of influence, in the things we can do something about, we're focusing on the right thing. Yeah.
So let's take the bull by the horns then, and let's start, thinking it and move the conversation further forward. How do you set up a DE&I process that doesn't come by de facto discriminative to others? Because I've seen so many processes come in place where you're discriminating one party and not the other, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you set up a DE&I process that doesn't come by de facto discriminative to others?
You do it properly. properly. You don't make it a tick box exercise. You don't take documentation and process that belongs to somebody else and just think that you can put it in your organization and that's all you need is a template. You actually think about, okay, how do I attract candidates? Is your first, well, whether it's for you or for your clients. Where do I get them from? Where am I advertising? Who is seeing it? What are the barriers? Who are the groups that I'm not getting to? What do I need to do about that? What barriers am I inadvertently putting in place that I could do something about, so that I am making sure that the pool of available candidates is as wide as possible? What's the debate I'm having with my clients about their barriers? What are they doing about? How am I supporting my clients to have better policies, to have better processes, to remove barriers, to widen exclusion? And it's not thinking it's a tick box exercise or it's a process, Howard, but it's genuinely having those conversations and that thought process about what's going on in this recruitment process, in this recruitment exercise, and doing it properly.
Yeah, and having intelligent answers for the white men who tend to say things like in jest, but unfortunately I don't accept it in jest, when they say things, oh, with all this going on, we're becoming the minority. Yeah. Now, my first response is an unethical one of I just want to hit you, which doesn't help anybody and I wouldn't recommend. But it's to have an answer to that. Yeah. Because that, I hear that quite often. And you've got to have an answer that doesn't knock them down, but tries to help them see the other side of that. And again, going back to your stats, not that I would reel off all your stats, Howard, but some of those stats, look, there's an economic argument, there's a moral argument, there's a social argument, there's a professional argument. How many different arguments do you want to help you see another view?
My favorite quote in those stats to throw in there is, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it is something like, there are more CEOs called Dave in the top one, in the Fortune 100 than there are women CEOs.
Oh, well, I'm not in the top 100. I'll change my name. I'm so sorry.
But it's a great stat to throw into those conversations about, woe is me.
Well, that's a horrible stat, isn't it?
It's dreadful.
But it's back to that thing, is if we get our process right, and we, as you say, Dave, we have the answers to questions that people sometimes don't want to hear but need to hear, but it's the right answer. And then sometimes it's about having that bravery to sometimes walk away from clients that aren't embracing the diversity changes that are happening, and drive that. And I was just about to say it's driven from the top, but and let's just put it straight to the chat box. It is it's absolutely driven from the top. And if the top doesn't believe it, then it's never going to trickle down too far until the top changes. But as we've already sort of alluded to, the newer people coming into work now are all in this diversity inclusion mold, and they all understand it and they all work through it, and obviously they're going to become the next managers and the next directors, etc., etc. So it might take a long time, but what you're going to start to find is there's going to be a big division, even bigger than say the millennial division and managers above that, from these two marketplaces. And that's where businesses will start to change, because they'll have to adapt, they'll have to change. And that's where that process might speed up. But at the moment, the top still is very, I suppose, blinded by this, and they don't understand what to do and what to change, because they don't see it as a true problem. They just want to get the person into the business and working in the business, but they don't understand what that business then looks like and how it looks from the outside world. And we've all got to work hard at trying to change that and working forward to change that. And so if we looked at that and keep trying to sort of push this into a positive frame, if we looked at it as an opportunity to further differentiate our recruitment services, this is what we went to when we talked to we had 3 clients on the webinar about 12, 18 months ago, and they were talking about coming to them with different opportunities, different services that isn't just putting a bum on a seat. So is this a service that we can then take to clients and help to differentiate as well as help to educate clients?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's a differentiator, and so many clients are crying out for help and support in this area. So yeah, absolutely. And if we are holding ourselves out as specialists, as consultants, not just recruiters, then yeah, absolutely, this has got to be something we have in our toolkit of things to help. But I actually think if you take a step back, it's even deeper than that. And your slide is interesting here, Howard, with a diverse mix of voices leads to better discussions, decisions, and outcomes for everyone. Absolutely, yeah, it does. But actually, there's a really interesting piece of data and some research that was done that said if you've got a culture that talks about inclusion, if you've got a culture where diversity, equity, inclusion is a big deal, what you do is you create a culture where everybody feels safe and they feel able to innovate.
Yeah.
And actually they feel able to put their hand up and go, I've had an idea, I've thought of something new. And so actually you get innovation and creativity because you're talking about diversity, even if you're early on in your journey and you haven't yet got a diverse mix of voices, right? So if you're an organization that is still full of everybody who looks and sounds the same with the same background, and you can create in the idea of innovation and safety and creativity by talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's still worth doing it, even if it's going to take a long time, because you will create solutions for your clients by creating a culture in your organization where people are willing to stand up. And we've lost Howard there for a minute. We're creating a culture where people feel able to do it.
Yeah. And I think, Heather, to your point, it's also quite important for us all to say when we don't know where we are on the journey or how we're going to answer some of these questions, that we don't know. Because I think a lot of our clients don't really know where they are either.
Yes.
They get bombarded with more and more information, or somebody from the top will say, I need to know some information, get me this. We as recruiters can provide that information, but we can also be part of the solution for the client.
Yes.
Without saying these are the answers, saying actually this is the journey we've been on, and you can come with us, and mention the pitfalls, mention how hard it was, mention the difficult conversations, and this is what we had to address, this is what we had to overcome, this is how we did it. I think that's really important, because I think sometimes clients look to us expecting all the answers, and actually all we've got is more questions.
Yeah,
and
okay. Diversity, equity, and inclusion's got a bit of a reputational problem, hasn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to talk about some of this stuff, but not under the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
So you start using that language, instantly it turns people off. We put diversity in the title of our webinars, people don't come. But what we have to do is, when we're having discussions about generating candidates in our organization, we're throwing those concepts in, we're just not labeling it.
Yeah, if we put something like being an inclusive leader, how to be more creative, how to be more self-assured, how to have better emotional resilience, how to be more authentic, how to be more flexible, how to be more inquisitive, I think more people would sign up. If you then said this is all about diversity, they'd go, oh really? Oh, I thought it was something else. And yet the two are absolutely intrinsically linked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting when we start to think on that, and we're taking this as a differentiator and an opportunity. But if we start to think about stepping up as a professional industry, if we can start to take the lead and the charge on this, then surely we are the people that are enabling companies to recruit. We're the people that are enabling people to find the best skilled people in the marketplace, etc., etc., etc. And I think we've got to then take that on board and drive that into the marketplace. And the more we drive it into the marketplace, then, the higher profile that becomes. Now, recruitment is, whatever you say you look on LinkedIn, the amount of recruiters on LinkedIn can have a massive effect from a social media point of view. And the amount of people now that are using social media to attract candidates, to attract clients, etc., etc. It's all part of that process of almost marketing DE&i into the marketplace properly in a positive way. Because I think sometimes what we've actually done is we've posted it in a way that it becomes almost a negative.
And certainly really preachy, Howard. Some of it I've seen.
Yeah,
really
we were talking about it before we came on air about those webinars that we did. Neil Carberry came out with a comment that the middle-aged white man needs to be allowed to make a mistake, so that we can then correct the mistake rather than having it rammed down his throat and saying you've made a problem, you need to cure that. It's how do you cure it? Because as Annette has put on there, they don't know how to cure it, and maybe they're a little bit ashamed on it. So maybe this is an opportunity for recruitment to step up and be that professional body that it should be to most employers, and actually start to take that on board and how we can help them with that. And that could be in our recruitment processes and our recruitment policies of what we're trying to do. And I think we've got to sort of embrace that and move that forward, because if we don't embrace it, then why would they embrace it? We're the people out there finding the majority of their staff. So here's a question then to finish off with. What do you think will be the impact, if you could look at recruitment in a couple of years' time, what do you think will be the impact on recruitment because of DE&i?
I want to really end on a positive note, and I'm struggling. Jake, you go positive. You go first while I think of something positive to say.
Well, okay. More access to talent pools. If you're more aware of where talent resides, you've got access to talent. And everybody at the moment, let's just look at the next couple of years, should we do that? We're all short of candidates. We're used to fishing in the same sort of pools because our clients want the candidates right now, rather than waiting and being part of a program to help. So can we do both? Can we continue to look right now and find the best candidates, but can we also expand our horizons and look at different talent pools where there may be people who are able to work from home, where there may be those that are less abled who can work, who don't have to commute. There's the baby community we know all about. It's those sort of things where if we can demonstrate we are placing candidates from the diverse community, from the wider community, then it will have an impact, a positive impact on recruitment. And the big thing for me is we're the recruiters. We're the ones that should be doing this, because we're the ones finding 1 million people, whatever the number is, I forget the REC number, Heather, but we're 1 million people in jobs each year.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility, whether we like it or not, it's our job.
And I've come up with my positive. I thought it gave me enough time for me to think. There are new recruitment businesses being started all the time.
6,000 last year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting to look at recruitment in a few years' time and see what the impact of young people coming into the industry, working in established recruitment businesses, seeing how it's done and going, I can do that better. So that's been happening for millennium, hasn't it? That people come in to recruiters, say, I can do this better, and then start their own recruitment businesses. A lot of people on the call will have done that themselves. Yeah. So I'm very excited to see what the next generation of entrepreneurs are going to do with recruitment, are going to create their own way of doing things, their own organization with their own values, and with their own context. And so I'm really excited to see what that potentially is going to do for recruitment, because I think it could be really exciting to watch that next wave.
So it's interesting, isn't it, that if you look at, say, Paul's son has created a company called Candidate X, which is all about diversity from the candidate's point of view and how the candidate is then pushed into the marketplace and how they work in the marketplace. And they have had several rounds of funding, large funding, because of this is where the market is moving. And so I can see that we are constantly going to be pushing the boat out in the most positive way. And I think this will change recruitment from being, the body shop to being actually something that is a professional service that comes into companies and can help companies identify where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, but not only from a skill point of view and a behavioral point of view, but from a diversity point of view, and how they can then cure that. And then that will then go back out into the recruitment and how we work and how we bring people back into the marketplace. So I think there's going to be sort of some interesting changes that will happen. And I think there'll be some very positive changes that will happen. But as we keep saying, it will be only led by the leaders who want to do that. And as those leaders start to get more and more momentum, it will start to gather, as most things do. And I think we've got to start to think, if we're at the forefront of that, then we should be in a far better position. And yes, as Annette said, there we could be talking about this we've been talking about it for 30 years, and we'll be talking about it for another 30 years. But it'd be interesting what that conversation in 30 years is actually like. And it'd be interesting, if we're still here running these webinars, who's actually attending the webinar. Will it be 100% female, except Dave and I, from an attendance point of view? And hopefully it will be very, very different. And that's the thing that we've got to sort of hope and look for. So that's it for this week. It's an interesting one to go back and review, and it's an interesting one to see that we haven't potentially moved very further forward in 12 months, or have we? I think we're a lot more aware, and I think we're a lot more courageous about some of that, and I think we've got a little bit more of an understanding, but I think we need to actually dig into it and really start to work on it to understand where we should be going. Some of the things that will help us is what we're going to discuss next week. Next week, we're going to have a really good look at your tech stack and how your tech stack should be enabling you as a business. What we're going to talk about, we're going to bring a tech expert in from a recruitment point of view, who's going to give us some really good ideas on what's the new modern technology out there that can help us with this. And then the week after that, we've got Neil Carberry on as well, talking about what the market is really starting to look like. So that'll be a really interesting week. Ladies, and I will say ladies, thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to have said ladies and gentlemen, but I can't say gentlemen because other than Dave, there's no other gentleman on this call, which is absolutely
I'll say
atrocious.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can say that. Ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I'm almost embarrassed from that point of view. But thank you all for your contribution. Much appreciated. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Take care. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm off to change my name.